Help keep Kinks and Beats Daily ad-free and receive bonus content early with a contribution of 20 cents per episode. Visit herohabit.com/shop for more information. Welcome to Kinks and Beats Daily. I'm your host, Tony Fry, and this is episode 106. Thank you for downloading and listening. Today we are talking about the song Mr. Big Man by the Kinks, released February 12th, 1977 on their album Sleepwalker. This is a cool song. And I actually got an email from someone who pointed out to me that I don't particularly care for the Sleepwalker album. And that could not be further from the truth. I actually like most of this album. I don't always agree with the production style. Although it was appropriate for the time. I think it sounds dated, but there's some good songs on there, and this is one of them. It was recorded in mid-December 1976. For all intents and purposes, the album was finished. And John Dalton quits the band, the bass player, and they need to find, audition somebody. So they're doing auditions, and then one thing turns to another, and they're doing a recording session for this song with Andy Pyle on bass. Now, Dalton had been playing with the band for about a decade. I mean, he was a temporary bass player, on the road with them for a bit, and then left, and then came back as the permanent bass player for about 8 years. So he'd been a long-standing bassist with the band. He's been on some of their pivotal albums. And I think, personally, he's my favorite Kinks bass player. And Andy Pyle comes in, records this song. It gets thrown on the album. Even though this is, like I said, the album's pretty much done. They record this a couple months before its release, and it makes the cut. Even though it doesn't really fit thematically with the rest of the album on the subject matter, it fits in tone and everything. Now, all that said, Pyle's going to be a member of the Kinks for about 13 months. He does not have a huge impact on the catalog. He does one song on this album, and then he's all over the Misfits album. But this is not the bass player that's going to last the next 8 years, replacing John Dalton. That said, his bass playing on this song is spectacular. It is such a cool bass line. It's supportive of the song, but kind of floating all over the place and kind of funky on a song that's not particularly funky. But it's a very cool bass line. The only thing I don't like is he does some, on some of the long notes ending phrases, he does this vibrato that it goes like a step beyond vibrato, and it's just pitch bending, and it just sounds like an out-of-tune bass. But with those few exceptions, with those couple notes here and there, his bass playing is spectacular. While doing research for this, I came across a blog that reviewed this 10 years ago or so. And the blogger said that this album should be listened to at night. And some albums are like summer day albums. Some albums are like when you're mowing the lawn, you put on this album. When you're, when it's cold outside, you put on this album. When you're sad, you put on this. Like certain albums are really suited for specific seasons or times of day or whatever. And I actually really agree with that blogger. This album in general is a great nighttime album. It's called Sleepwalker, so it's kind of fitting that it would be. But this song in particular, I do not listen to this when you're going to sleep. You listen to this when you are driving at like 1 a.m. on a summer night with the windows down, and you're on the freeway going 75, and the windows are down, and you just got this song blaring. That's the perfect way to listen to this tune. It kind of reminds me of Death on Two Legs by Queen, in that it's this scathing and clearly autobiographical song that does not mince words. It's not cryptic at all, other than the fact that we don't know who the singer is talking about. Queen actually put the parenthetical title of Death on Two Legs is actually dedicated to ... So they were even taking it a step further with their ambiguity. But Ray does not say specifically in this song, he doesn't give a clue really who it could be. I remember when you started out, you were the best friend I ever knew. I tried to meet you when you had your success, but you had better things to do. Now I bet that you're losing count of the people that you used, but now we're going to see the vicious side of you. Okay. That could really be any number of people. There are a lot of theories online that it could be John Lennon, who he had a beef with from their early days. I find the John Lennon theory kind of a long shot because if you just look at the context of the times historically, at this point, Lennon. Okay, so the song says, Mr. Big, you've got the say and the power. Your minions grovel and cower, but I see you and I see me. But you're the big man now. You got it, Mr. Big. Now, this song comes out February 1977. At this point in John Lennon's career, he is in the middle of a 5-year sabbatical from rock and roll. He's staying home. He's the house husband, as he said, staying home and taking care of his son, Sean. So he's not the big man. He has no power. He hasn't done anything. His last album of original music came out 3 years earlier. So it's been 3 years since he's been relevant on the charts. He wasn't out touring. And he was for, 5 years, not to this point. He was like 2.5, 3 years in at this point. He's basically a recluse. So I don't think that Lennon is probably the subject matter on this unless the song originated from years before and just never made it even to a recording session until 1976, which I also think is unlikely. So I guess it could be Lennon if there was some sort of slight, behind closed doors in 1966 that triggered this song. But I'm not buying that one because I think if Ray was so upset to have written this type of song about Lennon, he would have done it in 1967. Back in the peak of both bands' commercial success coming out of the British invasion and all that kind of stuff. That would have been the time to write it. Not when Lennon's in practical retirement. Mick Jagger, I could see that. I mean, also, the Beatles and the Kinks came from two different places, where Mick Jagger and Ray Davies, I think, are a little bit more geographically similar. And, Ray Davies had actually suggested to Mick Avery that he should drum for the Rolling Stones. And it never happened, never ended up, he ended up being the drummer for the Kinks. But, they were coming up at the same time. The Beatles were a little bit ahead of them as far as, their success and their stature in the music business. They were even a few months, when you're talking about rock and roll, a few month head start is a huge head start. So Mick Jagger could have possibly been it. I don't really know much about their history there. But Jimmy Page, that's an interesting theory for me. Because Jimmy Page is the only one with a direct Kinks connection. There had been rumors basically since 1964 that Jimmy Page is the one that plays the guitar solo on You Really Got Me. He was present at some of the early recording sessions. And he was a well-known studio guy at that time. But, well-known studio guys aren't really the top of the ladder as far as, having minions and all that kind of stuff. So it kind of makes sense that, I remember when you started out, and he's not saying, I remember when we started out. And that's what kind of makes me think that this might be about Jimmy Page. He's not saying, I remember when we started out, we were the best, you were the best friend I ever knew. Mick Jagger was starting out at the same time as Ray Davies. Lennon more or less was starting out at the same time. Like I said, they were a little bit of head start, but Jimmy Page was a little bit behind. And he was an up and coming session guy when the Kinks were doing their first recordings. So he's a little bit behind. So I remember when you started out, and then obviously Jimmy Page by the mid 70s is a rock icon and a god who does have minions and does have all the power and is in the biggest rock band in the world. Where Mick Jagger has been in one of the biggest rock bands in the world for 15 years at this point, but not really. 1977 is not Let It Bleed era Rolling Stones. So we've got this. So there's that Kinks connection, and we've got the he says I'm scrolling through the lyrics here. But now you're hot and sitting on the top. Okay, now you're hot. This makes it sound more recent than Mick Jagger or John Lennon, who had been hot just as long as Ray Davies had been hot, and going back 13 years at this point. But now you're hot. You've got no time for anyone. You schemed and connived. You pushed and you lied, till you at last became a star. Okay, so this reference to this big lie could be a reference, if he's glomming onto the Kinks' up and coming stardom by saying, look, I'm the one that played the guitar solo and cutting Ray's brother. And it's one of those things, I can make fun of my brother, but if you make fun of my brother, we're going to have some problems. This could be that instance where it's like, I can diminish Dave's value as a guitar player all I want because I'm the leader of the Kinks. But Led Zeppelin can't go in here and diminish them. We're going to go out back and duke it out. So that one line, you pushed and you lied. If he believes Jimmy Page is the one that kind of enhanced this rumor that had been dogging them for years, and is still a rumor. I still hear it to this day. Oh, did you know Jimmy Page actually played? No, he didn't. He didn't play the solo. Frankly, between you and me, Dave Davies is the better guitar player. There, I said it. But now we're going to see the way you really are. So if it comes down to it has to be one of these three guys, Lennon, Jagger, or Page, I'm going to think it's probably Page. But I have no say on it. I looked in all the books I've got. There is no direct reference to who he was talking about. It's all fan theory, and it probably will remain that way forever. If Ray, Dave, if you guys are listening to this podcast and you want to shatter the myth and call in and tell me who this song is written about, I would be eternally grateful. But until that happens, I'm sure this is just going to be a mystery that we're going to argue about as long as we are discussing this great band's music. All right, so there's a couple things. I mentioned that thematically, it kind of reminds me of Death on Two Legs. Harmonically, however, it reminds me a lot of Wall Street Shuffle by 10cc. And if you are not familiar with that song or hadn't put that connection together, I'm sorry to have wrecked this for you. So we've got Mr. Big Man starts off on a D. Oh, no, that's the main verse. Starts off on a D minor chord to B flat, and then a C C D minor with the D minor coming up on the upbeat. So we're going. Dun, 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 dun. All right, then we go to Wall Street Shuffle, which is in the same key. C, C, D minor, same pattern, same exact chords. You can play, they just play the guitar riff. There's not really a chordal accompaniment to it, but you can play that. You can play the exact same chords over the guitar riff, and it still works harmonically. So this song came out in 1974. It's actually one of my favorite 10cc songs. That's another band. In 5 years, when we've run out of songs to do here, maybe I'll cover 10cc. But it is a striking resemblance at how similar those two things are. And that happens a lot. There's nothing particularly imaginative about the chord sequence here. But the way it's accented and phrased and everything does make this incredibly, incredibly similar. So that's Mr. Big Man. I want you to go to Spotify if you use Spotify and look for Kinks and Beats, and there's a playlist there. And if you follow that, you can listen to all the songs are posted on Monday. So everything we're going to talk about for the week is posted there, and then all the songs we've already talked about are left there. So you can listen to the songs ahead of time and refresh your memory or refresh your ears, or go back and listen to it now after we've talked about it a little bit and listen to it maybe in new ears, listening to the words to see if you can figure out who he's singing about. Listen to that bass line. Dave's guitar work on this is unreal. He's doing some really cool lead lines, and it's all very tasty. It's like it's walking right up to the line of being overdone, but never crosses it. It's just the perfect amount of guitar, and I love the tone of his guitar on this track. So go listen to that. And of course, if you swing by herohabit.com, you can, under the podcast button, you can find all the ways to contact me, including email, kinksandbeats@herohabit.com, voicemail, 925-494-1739. And you can also contribute $4 a month to help keep this podcast ad-free. So swing by herohabit.com. We've also got a discussion group for Kinks and Beats Daily in our community section there. All right, I will talk to you guys soon, and thank you for listening. This podcast is presented by the Hero Habit Podcast Network. Swing by herohabit.com today to comment on this episode and poke around our growing database of sports and pop culture news, reviews, and collectibles. herohabit.com. Collect your heroes.